Hi, I'm Rachel from Rachel's Guest Tutor at Pretty Witty Cakes. So you might just have noticed that we're not filming in our normal studio, and that's because we've taken Pretty Witty Cakes on the road. And in today's freebie tutorial, I'm going to show you a little bit about how to paint in gold and silver. A lot of people look at beautiful cakes online and they think, oh my God, how did she make those lines gold or silver? Are you actually piping silver and gold, or are you painting it? So actually, I'm painting it, okay? And this is how we do it. You do have to have a little bit of a steady hand. In this pot here, I've just got some royal icing, some plain royal icing. If I was going to be doing my piping as silver, I would leave my icing white. But today, I'm going to show you how to do it in gold. So the technique is exactly the same. But to paint in gold, I'm going to colour my icing with a little bit of brown. So you could use brown, or you could use a sort of eggy yellow mixed with a bit of brown. All I'm trying to do is make my royal icing a bit more similar in colour to what I'm painting. So remember that if you're going to do silver, you can leave your icing white, or you could add a tad of shadow grey to the icing just to start to give it that silvery colour. We're going to do the brown, so I'm giving it that more browny gold colour. And that's because when you do go to paint what you've piped, and you'll see that in a moment, there's my brown going in, it's very hard to get all the way around the underneath edges. So if your piping is already similar in colour to what you're painting, it's a real jumble of words, then it looks a lot better. Okay, so I'm just mixing that up. Okay, and you can already see, here's my gold and silver paint palette, which looks a real mess, but that's only because these dusts, they do get everywhere, and I tend to use the same palette. We're much more similar in tone now to these colours in my palette than I was when it was white. You can see I've got one little section in there with some silver in, okay? So I'll just mix this about, and I'm going to get it to a nice piping consistency. So I may just need another little drop of water in there. Okay, so I've popped a little drop of water in there, and that's a nice piping consistency. And I shall get myself a piping bag. So you might be doing some pretty cupcakes with a little border. You might just be doing some little polka dots. There we go. Popped a number 2 nozzle in there just so you know what size we're using, and then pop a little bit of icing in there. Okay, so I'm just going to pipe something very simple for you, and then we're going to give that a little moment to dry, and then we'll come back and paint it. So I've just iced up a board here just so I can show you some piping, and I've also got a couple of little butterflies there. Coming in. A couple of little butterflies on there which I'm also going to pipe. Okay, so on this board I'm going to pipe just some little dots. And maybe you've got a border on your cake, let's just do a little wiggly border there. Some more little dots. It's much easier to pipe something that's thicker than something that's thinner. So I would suggest that when you do your piping, if you go any less than a 1.5 nozzle and you've got a really, really fine line, then it's so delicate to paint, you'll find it very tricky and your paint will end up seeping onto the cake, okay? So I wouldn't go any less than a number 1.5. Let's just do a slightly thicker line here, just so we can give you a little example. Okay, so I'm just going to sit those off to one side to dry. Ideally, your piping will dry fully, so go away, leave it for several hours until that's really, really nice and firm and dry. Okay, so I'm going to pop that to one side and let it firm up a bit. And then also I just thought I'd show you a couple of little butterflies. I'm going to be using these a little bit later on a cake. So I've just given my butterfly a little body. And we're also going to sit those off to one side to dry. Okay, so that piping I did earlier has had a nice bit of time to dry, and I'm happy that it's ready to be painted. So to go on and talk a little bit about the painting, I'm using some different dusts here. Now, I pointed out earlier my really messy tray of gold dusts. The great thing is a lot of the solutions that we use to do the painting, which I'll talk about in a moment, because they evaporate, this powder has been liquid at some point, and then the alcohol has just evaporated off it and it's turned back to powder again. So I tend to keep my little tray covered with a piece of tin foil because it is a bit messy. And then when I'm ready to use it, I like to use the same palette. One, because the dust does get everywhere and it's a bit tricky to keep cleaning it all the time. And two, I have my favoured brushes, and I have some nice different coloured golds here that I've mixed up. So this is my palette at home. There's all sorts of different coloured dusts that you can get on the market. I've just got some down here to show you. There's a silver one and a couple of different golds. I've mixed up different kind of golds here. You can get a lovely coppery gold. Sometimes you might have a client come to you and want to have a different kind of shade of gold than the ones you've got in the pots. You can mix the colours up to achieve something different. So have a little play with that. These are some Sugar Flare edible luster dusts, okay? This one happens to be called Royal Gold. What's this one? This one is called Gold Sparkle. That's one of my favourite ones, Gold Sparkle. You can see they're ever so slightly different. There's also a beautiful coppery one that Sugar Flare do as well. So have a look at your different gold dusts. We've also got a silver there. That's called Satin Silver, okay? So all sorts of different dusts. And what I would do is just tap a little bit of dust out into my tray. And then we need to make it liquid form. So you can pre-buy little pots with the dust in it already mixed with the alcohol. It's a bit more of an expensive way to do it, I would say. So I tend to like to buy the dust and do it myself. In here we have some dipping solution. This is my preferred method for painting the dusts. You can use neat alcohol, or you could use maybe some vodka. If you had some in the cupboard, that's also fine to use. And another product that's good to use is lemon extract. So all of these products contain a certain amount of alcohol, and that, when you've painted on your paint, is going to evaporate quite quickly, and then the dust will remain on the item that you've painted. So don't use water. That's just going to make your icing all soggy and horrible. Find one of these products to do your painting, and that will help the paint go on. And then as that alcohol evaporates, the dust will remain nice and dry on the items that you've piped. So here's that bit of piping that we did earlier, nice and dry now. And in my tray, I'll just take potluck at any one of these golds. Pop a little bit, a few drops in there. So it doesn't need to be too much, but as you do your work, you will find after 10 minutes that liquid will have evaporated. For some very strange reason, this old paintbrush here is one of my absolute favourites for painting my gold. And that's mostly because I'm happy with the little bit on the end of the brush there. For some reason, I've decided that it's a really nice size. There's not any sticky bits coming out of it. It's not too fat. It doesn't hold too much liquid. It's just become my ultimate favourite. So you might find a favourite for painting with. And then make sure that you've stirred, let's tip that round, stirred your gold colour nicely into that liquid, and that all that dust is suspended within the powder. And then bring your brush over. Let's do our little dots first. Bring your brush over and very gently just brush it across the top of your piping, okay? And you can see there, if you look very closely, that I haven't tried too hard to get all the way around and underneath that dot. You can try very carefully to get round the edge as much as you can, but this is all going to depend on how steady your hand is, okay? What you don't want to do is be trying to paint round the edge and then go, oh, whoopsie daisy, now you've messed up your cake because you've got gold all over it. Another thing that can happen is if you load up your brush with too big a blob of gold, you go down to put it on the icing, and as it touches the icing, there you go, that's happened. It sort of floods it, and you can see how that's now all gone all the way around the outside and messed up your cake, okay? So don't overload the brush, and just bring the brush to your piping and then just gently stroke it around the top and let it fall down the edges a little bit, but stay away from trying to do too much around the edges. And that's exactly why we coloured up our icing in a similar colour to what we're painting, so that it's not so obvious to the eye. Okay, so if I just show you now how I would quickly paint over these items here. Okay, so that's all our little dots done, and if you look at it from the front, it looks beautifully gold, and actually if you look at it from the back, you can't really see the bits that we haven't painted, okay? So it's just that little edge on the underneath. And then again, load up that brush, and if you're doing a line, you can then just stroke your brush all the way along the top of the line. You can see I'm steadying my hand here ever so slightly, just so that my brush drags along the top of the line. Again, another reason why I haven't got a big fat paintbrush is I don't want all those bristles sticking onto my cake. I just want my gold to land on the top of the line, and there you go. If you do have a thicker line like this one, that one that we piped, if I drag my brush all the way along the top, you might find, and this will be really hard for you to see, from a different angle, there may be an area, maybe to the end there of my line, where you can see quite a clear difference between the gold and the piping. Just gently run around the edge, okay? Just try to look at your cake from a different angle. So here, maybe at this end, I can still see the piping quite a lot. So I'm not going too close to the cake, but I'm just, because it's a thicker line, just taking it round and over that edge bit, okay? And then onto our little butterflies. Again, I'm just going to drag that brush down the centre of the butterfly on both sides and cover as much of that piping as I can, very gently keeping the brush away from the icing. And it's really quick and really simple to do. So remember, if you're doing silver, I would do my piping in a very pale grey or white, and I would be mixing up my silver dust in exactly the same manner as I've done my gold. And that is how you paint gold and silver on your cake.